buttons. Yep, there we go. Okay, thank you. Now, this is the first of two calls. We're going to have another call on Thursday, the 14th of July at the same time. And I'll put the link in the chat if you wish to register for that. That will focus on the labor movement, more specifically in the occupied areas. And both calls have a practical purpose. We've asked our speakers to tell us first about the situation in the occupied areas and what organizations in Ukraine are doing about it. And secondly, what they think we might be able to do from outside Ukraine. That's a practical and quite a complicated issue, and we do not expect to find all the answers this evening. We will have to keep working at it. And with that in mind, in addition to today's call and the one on the 14th about the labor movement, the European Solidarity Network will have a third call, bringing together people from different European countries to develop the work of our working group on the occupied areas. And we want to do that on Sunday, the 17th of July, 10 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock European time. And we'll then discuss the practical issues that arise during our discussions this evening and on the 14th. If you wish to participate in that, please email, I think, Adam Novak, who's helped to arrange everything here and is one of the organizers of the European Network. Adam will put the right email address in the chat. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. There's two of them here with us at the moment. Let's see if the others manage to join us. Here's Oleksandr Kliuzhev as well. Hi, Oleksandr, greetings. And Maria. Okay, you're all here. 100% turnout. That's great. Okay, let's start then. Now, in that case, since you're all here, I'm going to take the speakers in the order that you were named in the announcement of the meeting, if that's okay. And so, Maria, I'm going to come to you first. Is that all right? Okay. So we'll take.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fine. Thank you. We'll take Maria and then Alexander, then Dennis, and then Vlad. I want to ask you each to speak for 10 minutes and to give us some idea, both about what's happening in the occupied areas, what your organizations are doing about it, and also if you have any suggestions about what we outside Ukraine should do. There's quite, as you can see in the chat, there's quite a range of civil society organizations and labor movement organizations represented here. So we're looking to you to hear about things we can do from outside Ukraine, as well as to tell us about what's going on inside Ukraine with respect to these areas. So without any more ado, Maria Kurinna is here representing the Human Rights Center ZMINA. It's one of Ukraine's largest organizations working to defend human rights. Maria.
Thank you very much, dear madams and sirs. It's an honor for me to be with you today. And I will slightly tell more about recent developments in the occupied territories. But before, I would like to present our organization. Our organization, ZMINA Human Rights Center. ZMINA means change in Ukrainian. It has been working for 10 years promoting human rights related reforms in Ukraine. And for 8 years, the organization has been documenting and reporting regarding human rights violations in the occupied Crimea, especially with a focus on freedom of association violations, violations of freedom of speech, freedom of assemblies, and attacks on journalists, on human rights defenders and activists in the occupied area. And from the second day of full-scale invasion, our organization established the coalition, which is called Ukraine 5 AM coalition. This is the time when Russian Federation started the attack on Ukraine in the morning of 24th of February. And now the coalition consists of 29 Ukrainian human rights organizations that document war crimes and crimes against humanity and other gross human rights violations in the territory of Ukraine regarding the full-scale war, Russia's full-scale war towards Ukraine. Our goal is to first bring perpetrators to justice, both high-rank top officials and military, and also to advocate for establishment of special tribunal for the crime of aggression or crime against peace, and also to bring some sense of justice for victims of these war crimes and crimes against humanities. I would like to focus more in my speech regarding several topics. First topic is the forced deportation of Ukrainian citizens to the Russian Federation and so-called filtration measures. And also, I would like to concentrate on the attacks on civil society and all active members of local communities and attacks on media in the occupied territories. It is a very worrying situation that has started when in the occupied territories, the Russian military were encircling the cities and the settlements, and later coming to local residents who were trying to find some shelters, saying that this is the only one reason now to evacuate, and this way is only, and the pass or so-called safe pass is to Russian Federation via so-called Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republic. So basically, residents of encircled, occupied settlements and cities had no choice to save their lives, but to go together with Russian military and other law enforcement via this occupied territories to Russia, and they were forced to go through filtration, so-called filtration measures. We know fact that cars were searched, people's cell phones were searched, people were asked to undress, mostly men, but we also know the facts that women were forced to undress. They have been searched for signs of tattoos or signs of participation in the combat, and any kind of tattoos were searched. We do not have exact facts what exactly are happening if some Ukrainian citizens or other people who were there in the occupied territories while hostilities started, what is the so-called procedure if some people raise suspicion. But we know facts that these people were who didn't go through this filtration measures, they were detained. There are a couple of facilities that Russian forces are using to detain Ukrainian citizens. We know about facts of ill treatment, of degrading treatment. We know cases of humiliation of dignity, and we know cases of tortures as well. And we also are very concerned that large amount of people who had to evacuate and who was forced to evacuate to Russian Federation and do not have documents are not able to return either to Ukraine or to go to European countries. Some people, depending on the region, are allowed to go without documents, but the majority cannot leave Russia without any documents, passports, or IDs. Some people are sent to very far regions of Russian Federation, to Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, and not the cities themselves, but settlements in the regions, these people, Ukrainian people, are left without connection, without cell phones, without some money, without means and information. And if they don't have relatives or some, I don't know, friends or acquaintances in the Russian Federation, they are forced in a very difficult situation. And also the worrying fact is that a lot of children were also deported, children under custody, children deprived from family care, children from orphanages, and children of those citizens of Ukraine who were killed during the hostilities. And we know that Russian Federation is in the process to make amendments in the legislation to make the procedure to adopt Ukrainian children easier. And this is really worrying, because this is gross violation of human rights. We have relatives, for example, grandparents residing in Ukraine of these children, demanding to these children be returned home to Ukraine, and they are not able to do this. This is the situation regarding the deportation, so forced deportation. It is also very important to say, and very important to be vocal and to raise your voice in any platform, any possible dialogue, media, to talk about people who faced enforced disappearances and abductions. We know that in local communities, unfortunately, we have been urging about this situation for these 8 years regarding Crimea and Eastern Ukraine temporarily occupied territories that faced the same mechanism of terrorizing local communities, especially their active members. There were enforced disappearances, there were abductions and arbitrary detentions. Now we have the same situation in newly occupied territories, but in a huge scale. And basically, who are these people? These people are regular members of local communities. They can be journalists, educators, cultural actors, local government officials, religious leaders, veterans, and any active members of society, of local communities who were vocal enough to stand up for Ukraine locally and saying, listen, these territories are a part of Ukraine, a sovereign country. You are not allowed to occupy these territories. You are not welcomed here. So this is the method to silence the resistance, to silence the voices of Ukrainian dissent, and to terrorize and spread fear among the local communities, for them to be silenced, basically, or even to force them to collaborate with the occupying power. And if to also talk about Crimea, because at this background of such a huge quantity of atrocities happening in mainland Ukraine, Crimea is facing a huge crackdown of local active society. We again faced enforced disappearances. Unfortunately, we had more than 40 cases when Crimea was occupied in 2014, 2016. Still 15 people's destiny is unknown. And on 29th of April 2022, Irina Danilovich, the local labor activist and civic journalist, was enforcedly disappeared. She was held incommunicado without any connection to the world for 13 days. We were not able to find her for 13 days, and we didn't know whether she was alive. We tried to search for her in any possible detention center in Crimea and in the Russian Federation. We raised voice at the international level, and only after this we found out that she has been held for 8 days in the local FSB office. She faced degrading treatment. She was forced to go through lie detector, and she was threatened to be taken to Mariupol, where high hostilities were taking place, or to the forest if she lies. She was fed once a day. She was allowed to go to visit toilet once a day, and this consists tortures. Her human rights lawyer was prevented to visit her in detention center, and only after he finally were able to see her, she gave this evidences. She was also forced to sign blank papers in exchange of possible freedom. And once she did this, she was promptly alleged in some fabricated case. She was told that law enforcement found 200 grams of explosives in her bag. So she's facing politically motivated prosecution and persecution now, and she can face actually 6 years of imprisonment. So, I mean, why I'm telling about this exact case, this is multiplication of this, like methodology of threatening all possible active and vocal Ukrainians in the occupied territories. It happened in Crimea, and now it's happening, unfortunately, in whole newly occupied territories. So from my side, I'm really asking everyone who have some 2-3 minutes, go to Twitter and tweet with hashtag #TheTaken, and you can also search. There is a campaign about Ukrainian abductees, people who are missing, and if we are vocal enough on every platform in every country, we can, show a sign to Russian leadership that they will be accountable, because we know names and surnames of our Ukrainian citizens, activists, and we also show the great solidarity for these people, because they are also fighting, but their way, and they are now in really great threat every day. I thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. I'm going to move straight on. Our next speaker is Oleksandr Kliuzhev of the Opora Civil Network. Opora started in 2005, monitoring elections and political processes and demanding transparency in government. As they say on their website, when they were students, and they've carried on all through that time until now. It's grown into a much wider network pressing for the development of civil society. Oleksandr.
Thank you, dear colleague, for the opportunity to speak with you. And I would like to start with a review of situation in temporarily occupied territory. And after that, I will tell more about our activities in these new conditions. What is happening in the temporarily occupied territories? We have several trends, and I would like to start with Russian aggression against Ukrainian language and culture in temporarily occupied territories. This is done by Russian openly and publicly. Libraries with Ukrainian books are destroyed. Children are forced to study in Russian. Russia have announced intention to reteach Ukrainian children to Russian language. In temporary occupied territories, Russians have created an aggressive youth movements pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian youth movement, and we can say that Ukrainian youth and Ukrainian children are priority for Russians, and they openly deny Ukrainians' right to exist in temporarily occupied territories. And in my view, it's very important point, because sometimes in similar discussion with our international partner, this point is in the background, in the backslide in this discussion, but Russian openly deny Ukrainian right to exist. It's this first point. Russia is damaging the connection between occupied and non-occupied territories of Ukraine at extremely fast pace, in comparison with previous stage of Russian aggression. This strategy applies to all spheres of life in temporarily occupied territories, and indicates that Russia is going to keep these territories under their control. We hope Ukrainian state and international community will damage Russian goals, but they're trying to damage all connection between citizens in temporary occupied territory and non-occupied territory. The Russians, as Maria, my colleague, said, have deployed unprecedented system of filtration for civilians in all occupied territories. During this illegal filtration, we examined undressing, beating, disappearance of people, threats of sexual violence. And with help of so-called filtration system, Russia is trying to increase so-called fund for the exchange of prisoners at the expense of civilians. When civilians impersonate impersonate the military, and Russia propose to exchange of these civilians for its military staff, and through system of filtration, Russian is trying to create an atmosphere of fear, because we can say that Russian doesn't have enough staff for its system in temporary occupied territories, and they trying to compensate this deficit of local staff for their actions through total atmosphere of fear. And unfortunately, so-called system of filtration contains this intention of Russians. In the occupied territories, property is taken from citizens of Ukraine, and the scale of illegal export of state and private property outside of Ukrainian territory is extremely huge. And now Ukrainian NGOs and the state are trying to prevent this illegal action on international level. And for instance, now Ukraine is trying to prevent illegal export of grain. I'm sure you know about this situation. And last thing I would like to pay attention more is so-called fake referendums and plans of Russia to organize fake referendum about future of this captured territories, and unfortunately, during previous 2 weeks, we can see a preparation to these fake referendums, and in our view, international community should pay more attention for this Russian intention, and for instance, through system of sanctions to prevent this activity from Russians and local representatives of Russian forces. And I want to tell more about our activity. Firstly, we have started collecting information of Russian war crimes, which is used to assist investigators in Ukraine, and also we assist international organization. For this purpose, we created a special website where citizens can provide information about war crimes, and on the basis of the collected information, we contributed to Moscow mechanism regarding the investigation of crimes committed by Russian troops in Ukraine. And now I'll send links for this resource in the chat, and also we have started to special crimes for refugees in Poland, and the team of our documentation assistance center will be partner for eyewitnesses and prosecutors, and we are planning to be engaged in education and mobilization of citizens of Ukraine who live abroad. Now lawyers and psychologists will conduct interviews of potential witness and will provide assistance for them. And now we are forming a team in Warsaw and starting to work. Also, we have started a special informational projects related to temporary occupied territories. For instance, every week on Monday we provide broadcasting for on Opora's resources, and the main topic of this broadcasting is situation and events on temporary occupied territories. For instance, the day before our meeting, I was involved in this broadcasting, and after this online broadcasting, we prepare article about trends in temporary occupied territory for popular Ukrainian newspaper Дзеркало Тижня, and why do we make these products? Because again, the background of hostilities and military activities, events in the temporary occupied territories are in the background, and often important events are left out of attention of national and international public, and through this mechanism we are trying to pay more attention to life of Ukrainian citizens in temporary occupied territories. Also, we actively research how Russian propaganda works in temporary occupied territories and publish special materials in popular Ukrainian media. For instance, the latest material concerned Russia propaganda on Instagram. It's only for example, but in collaboration with professionals in sociology, we did special research about Ukrainian media consumption during full-scale war in Ukraine, and I can provide links to this research in English. And through these researches and through these products, we are trying to prevent Russian propaganda activities and prevent disinformation made by Russians. And on a constant base, our lawyers prepare materials about legislative changes in Ukraine that concern of rights of international displaced persons and refugees. And through this product, we are trying to inform society how to deal with legislative changes in this intense situation, in this hard times. Maybe it's all I want to share. Thank you.
Oleksandr, thank you very much. There's a lot there for us in Western Europe to think about. Moving on to Denis Volokha of the Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group. This is a group that I know at least since 2014 has monitored the situation in the territories that were occupied then in the so-called People's Republics and in Crimea, and has also done an enormous amount this year to monitor the situation in newly occupied areas. So, Denis.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, if there is anybody from the United States, congratulations. And like, there's a democracy word in the title of this event. And I was thinking about, is there a thing about democracy on the Russian occupied areas? And so far, no luck. I think the most ugly political regimes tend to use democracy word in their names, like Democratic Kampuchea or Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Yeah, I want to tell short stories of 3 Ukrainian cities. Vovchansk is the small city in northern Kharkiv region that has been under Russian occupation since the first day of the invasion. It's located in a dozen kilometers from Russian border. From first days, Russian forces were just moving forward Kharkiv bound because they were thinking they are capable to reach the city, to capture the city, and they have managed to get in Kharkiv, but they saw hard resistance from Ukrainian forces and stepped back. So fierce fightings were going around the city. But over time, Russians were developing their occupation in Vovchansk. They had lists of people they thought are dangerous for them, like police officers, local authorities, representatives, or war veterans. And there was a report by Ukrainian authorities that they have established headquarters in local aggregate plant in Volchansk, and I'll go to Kharkiv by the end of the week, and I hope to interview one guy who was on this plant, and like he's former police officer, and I think his story is pretty interesting. But Russians in Volchansk, woman I have talked to said that she was receiving her salary from Ukraine for 4 months in the state of occupation, and she was able to get cash for a great commission, and she was living under occupation for a month, and she said there was no electricity for 2 months in the city. There's lack of food. Some old people just seem very hopeless over there. And what's interesting, there is no phone connection even now. And the only way to phone somebody is to find like a huge building and to catch the signal from Russian cellular tower, and also like TV is only Russian, and so the only information people can get is Russian state propaganda. And the second city is Kherson, southern city of Ukraine, which is also under occupation since the first day of the war. And like there are also many checkpoints in the city. Russians are really crazy about these checkpoints, and they're checking people every time. Like the day of average Khersonian is you have to ride to get a bus to ride to walk to the city center, and you have to spend hour or even more on these checkpoints, and they are very suspicious about everybody, especially conscription age men. And Kherson region is like a farming area of Ukraine, and the Russians did not allow farmers to sell the food, vegetables to Ukraine's territory, and the prices on food are very low. Like if you know the supply and demand curve, the supply makes the group, and you like this seems dead after 3 p.m. There's nobody on the streets, and there are a few stores that are still operating. Almost the only way to get the food or other supplies is just random markets on the streets without like food is selling without any packaging. You have to get bottle or other stuff to get it, and there's almost no way out from there right now, because it's too dangerous. You cannot use your car to get out. You need to go on foot and to go through all these Russian checkpoints and gray zone, and probably to pay a lot of money to Russians. And the third city is Mariupol. I'm working on documenting war crimes in this city, but I think that there's no team of documenters in the world that can document all the crimes that were committed in this city. But what is particularly interesting that everybody who I was interviewing was saying to me that like Russians on the first stage of the invasion, there are no Russian troops that go attacking the city, but there are troops of so-called DNR, Donetsk People's Republic, and like these young guys, these young Ukrainian guys who were living under Russian occupation for 8 years, like 8 years is a lot, and the whole generation has grown, and like this is what Putin's propaganda made from them, like in Spanish, el cieno de la razón produce monstruos, like the sleep of reason creates monsters. Yeah, so Putin's made monsters from these people, and his regime is using them just to kill other people. And then the question is what we can do about this. And this is the exact same question I asked former Ukrainian ombudsman Vlad Denisova 1 week ago, and her answer was that we need to disseminate just the people's stories and the information about this. And I think I can add to this reply that the price these people are paying, these people on occupied areas, is much more steep than €1 per liter of fuel. And like the only way to improve the situation is to make Russian forces to withdraw out from these areas and to recapture these by Ukrainian forces. And Russian propaganda is so widespread, and it is often underestimated. But I think it is so widespread that it affects not only the targets of propaganda, but even Russian authorities, Russian government representatives, because like propaganda chiefs like Margarita Simonyan, they know this is bullshit about Nazis in Ukraine, but I think some of many Russian government representatives do not understand it, and maybe this is the reason Russian army wasn't so successful in Ukraine. And like the more areas Putin can capture, the more monsters they can create with this propaganda, and the more people they can use like force to go and to kill other people. And this is why we can't ignore it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I just want to say that at the absolute minimum, what clearly we can do in the countries outside Ukraine is to make this information more easily available to much wider numbers of people. And I'm sure I'm not speaking only for myself when I say that we're very committed to doing that. Now I'm going to move on to our last speaker, Vlad Mykhnenko of the University of Oxford. Vlad is an economic geographer. He's the author of many papers and articles about the economic geography of Ukraine, among other places. And he comes originally from Donetsk and has been a prominent voice opposing the Russian invasion and occupation. So Vlad.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you everyone for organizing this and hosting this depressing yet very potentially useful conversation. I have been working on the Donbas generally for many years now, and since the original 2014 military intervention by the Russian forces in eastern Ukraine, I have been trying to document the human and economic loss that the region has suffered since then. I've put in the chat sort of the combination of that process, kind of the recurrent invasion situation in the occupied territories, particularly in the Donbas region, trying to count the human losses and also the economic losses, and generally describe the situation as it was valid for 2019, 2020. Even back then in the article, I've described the future of the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics as very bleak, facing further depopulation, economic decline, and degradation, the development or the erosion of development that those regions achieved before the war. However, even my worst predictions were actually quite optimistic, I have to add. And unfortunately, now we are facing a humanitarian catastrophe in the occupied territories, in particular in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasti, Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine. A few things to highlight, just for the people who may be not so familiar with the current situation. The best way to describe the position of the local population in those territories is that they're now been sourced as meat grinder for the war effort by the Russian army. Is the main purpose of their existence at the moment is to be cannon fodder. You have effectively a so-called mobilization drive in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, in which every man between 18 and 65 is effectively forcefully grabbed from the street and thrown into the war. The men, usually those who are trying not to get killed, are hiding at home for for 4 months. I have acquaintances who are hiding at home for more than 4 months now, just not to get on the streets to be arrested and taken to the military camp and then given a Mosin Nagant rifle of 1891, Soviet 1941 helmet, and sent to the trenches on the Ukrainian-Russian front line. However, not everybody is so lucky, and as we now know from the British intelligence report, over 50% of the so-called DNR and LNR forces have suffered 50% irrecoverable losses. So if you take the figure that was original pre-war figure of them being counting at 35,000 soldiers, if you take the pre-mobilization drive, we are looking at tens of thousands of deaths. In addition to the Russian army deaths, this is a very different story. But obviously, Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast are much smaller than Russia itself, and so you can imagine the impact on those regions generally. The mood music in the occupied territories, as far as I know, and of course we're relying on witnesses, we're relying on first-hand information from friends, relatives, acquaintances, schoolmates from Donetsk. I have the mood music has been changing in Donetsk and Luhansk recently to become a bit that could be described as a much more stable status now of the local population, who are really have had enough of 8 years of disaster experiment of the Russian occupation. We have seen what it has brought to them, and therefore they're quite, they're waiting for the I have to say the ending of this war, and so that brings us hope that the eventual liberation of Donetsk and Luhansk will not be as difficult as some people predict. The local population will not be hostile to the Ukrainian forces, given that they've already had enough of this current horrible situation. There is no water. There is no running water in the capital city of Donetsk. So you can imagine for 4 months, actually a bit more, people have been relying on buying water in shops to use for cooking, drinking, and even cleaning. The Russian occupation forces use the portable water trucks as a way to allure men to come out from hiding to take water to home and grab them there at next to the water potable water lorry. So they use every tactic to get as many men to the front line. The Russian army uses them effectively, literally, as cannon fodder. They're sending them first wave just to find out where the Ukrainian forces are hiding, so to just uncover the shooting range, and then they use them for mine clearance as well, as similar to the tactics of the Red Army in the Second World War. I have to say. So the situation is quite horrific. As you know, in Mariupol, they've been the new administration, the new occupation administration, is pretending to start clearing the bodies. However, it is effectively trying to hide the war crimes and do mass graves. Current situation is that the order has been given that all owners of property in Mariupol who are not there and who do not appear and show up in the next couple of weeks, the property will be confiscated by the new authority or the new administration. The local housing officials are given right now to enter every property and grab everything there, expropriate all the private property from any flat apartment that they can find. This is, of course, is done to get them as much as possible criminally involved in the unlawful acts, so that they will feel guilty if Ukraine returns. And the whole tactic has been to smash people as much as in innocent blood as possible, so that they're then fearful of Ukrainian army returning. We've seen a few cases of resistance, even in Mariupol. I think a couple of days ago, one of these looted piles of private property had been burned on the left bank district of Mariupol. So people are taking some response, but effectively without water, electricity, and food, the situation is pretty grim. But even in Donetsk, as I said, the situation is pretty grim. You have empty streets. There are no men. Women are driving cars. Women who never driven a car and never had a driving license have to learn it very fast. So because they have now not only the breadwinners, they are providers, because they go to shop to get some food and earn the money. The Russian army, as it is common knowledge now, or the Russian forces are trying to hide even the bodies of the Russian soldiers, not to pay 7 million rubles, which is about 120,000 euro compensation to wives or widows or mothers of the Russian soldiers. And everybody knows the mass graves in Crimea, where people from the Southern Front have been buried, from Buryatia and Tiva and all the faraway Siberian republics where the majority of the fighters are coming from for the Russian army. The forces, the DNR and LNR forces, get 20,000 rubles, which is something like 300 euro compensation per dead. 20,000 rubles, 340 euro for your, husband or son to be killed in the senseless war. So the situation is absolutely mad. What also the music also changed in a way that the local population now can clearly see the difference in technology and equipment between the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces. And that brings hope that they can see clearly that the newly equipped weaponry is a much different generation than the Russian army uses. And that also brings a change in dynamic and balance of forces, and people thinking has started to change and shift to think that Ukraine actually might return, although they haven't thought about that for years. So there is I can gather some kind of change on the street, on the empty street of Donetsk, which is probably one of the silver linings that I can give you to sort of dilute the overall gloomy picture. We've spoken quite a lot, and my colleagues have already described the situation in much detail, so I'll be happy to move on to the questions and answer session, Simon, so that we don't overwhelm people with information.
Vlad, thank you very much. Well, somebody's just put in the chat. It's devastating to hear, and yeah, I think these are very, very devastating stories, and it's difficult, in my view, to know, how to respond. We organised a letter from a load of political people here in the UK. Stephanie, who's present with us this evening, organised a similar one from Switzerland, and a lot of people signed it, and we put them up on the internet and so on. And yeah, it feels a little like nothing in front of the problems that you've outlined. So, what we hope is going to come out of this process of these calls is to find other things we can do and other ways that we can continue. Now, I want to start with questions to our speakers, and I'll take them from anybody. There are 3 screens full of you, so if you put up your hand or shout if I don't see you. Right, there's a hand. Aurora. Anybody else who come after Aurora? Well, Aurora, off you go, and then we'll see who comes next.
So, hello. Hello, everyone, and many thanks to the relators. You all gave very interesting hints into different situations regarding the wider conflict. I was very interested in understanding whether you would consider your groups to be representative or to be defined in a way as civil society organizations, and if not, or in that case, what would the role of civil society in a way be at this point in the against the temporary occupations. And there was also something that I wanted to have a bit of a better understanding from Dr. Mykhnenko. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. Regarding the fact that women didn't drive before. I signed something like this, but I wanted some clarification. Sorry if I misinterpreted it. And thank you again.
Okay, just before you answer, is there anybody else? Yeah, we've got another hand up there, Mark.
Hi, thanks very much, Simon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Quick question to the people that have been speaking. There have been a number of reports in the British press recently about partisan actions in the south of Ukraine, around in the Kherson area, Melitopol, and around there. And I'm wondering how people assess these. Who's exactly responsible for doing what there? So there's been some military actions, there's been some civil disobedience. Perhaps people can comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Any third question? We'll go back to our panel, right? Julia, yeah.
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. It's, as Dr. Mykhnenko put it, it's a very necessary but a very painful conversation. And I'm from Vinnytsia, and most of my friends and family are kind of central Western Ukraine. So I do not even know how people deal who have closer connections in the east of the country and in the Crimea. I cannot even comprehend that. So just some words of support and solidarity from the start. But I wanted to ask a question to Vlad, to you actually, because there is the summit in Lugano today and tomorrow, and I've been listening to today and to frustration to an extent, because you've mentioned this word de-development, and I've been looking at how Ukraine has been de-developed by oligarchs, markets, and all sorts of different things in my work. And of course, what the war and occupation has brought to Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast and to the Crimea and now to other parts of Ukraine is incomparable to what any market can do, indeed. But I was listening to a lot of these kind of conversations in Lugano. For those who do not know, it's an economic reconstruction forum for Ukraine that's happening in Lugano today and tomorrow. And there are a lot of discussions about, the new Marshall Plan and this and that and the other. And the Ukrainian government has prepared a 1,000+ word document that they've only, I don't even know if they've published yet, but it wasn't published on Friday yet. So they're presenting it today. But what I'm curious about, because what I hear that they are planning is it contains a lot of the original sins of what has brought the development to Ukraine before even the first invasion. It's, more private engagement, smaller state. There will be money poured in, but I'm not, there have been some positive improvements in terms of how procurement works and transparency and this and that and the other. But to my mind, it's not nearly enough to actually make meaningful, socially orientated transformation of Ukraine when this reconstruction happens. I just wanted to ask you to comment, but what is your assessment of where the government is heading with it? Because, it's very good, actors are can be very good wartime leaders recording videos, but they will not necessarily be the best economic development planners. So I just wanted to hear what is your assessment of what is to be done and actually what chances are there at reconstruction reform and reversing some of the de-development that has happened through economic mismanagement and through the war as well.
Okay, right. Thanks very much. Now, so thanks for that question, Yulia. That's taking us in a slightly different direction about what's going to happen in these areas after the war. Can we deal with the other questions first? Does somebody want to talk about the partisan actions? Any of our speakers? Mark's question about the partisan actions, who's doing this, as far as we know from outside. Would any of you like to comment on that?
Well, I can comment if I understood the question well. The question was who commit these alleged war crimes?
No, the question, sorry to interrupt you, Maria. The question from Mark was about the partisan actions. So we've seen in the press that reports that Ukrainian forces, and it's not clear whether they are, what connection they have with the Ukrainian army, are active inside these occupied areas, for example, attacking some of the officials who are collaborating with Russia, attacking some senior Russian officials, and so on. I mean, I don't know if your information is going to be any better than ours, because by its nature, it's hard to know, but that's the question.
Well, I think this is a very sensitive question, and I'm not a military expert to comment on the connection of these groups. But what we definitely see, we see the dissent and resistance in the occupied territories. No matter, it is very dangerous. It's life-threatening danger for these people to do it. We saw in the press also the distribution of little posters or some other information without it wasn't written who is distributing it, but there were clear signs that we are waiting for Ukrainian military, and we urge you that sooner or later Ukrainian military will come to take back the territories, because this is sovereign Ukraine. So we see this dissent, we see this resistance. Yes, there were cases of some elimination of some so-called leaders of the occupying power, but well, I also cannot comment because I don't have information who was doing this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Dennis, you want to come in on that? Yeah.
Yeah, Simon, do you mean human rights violations committed by Ukrainian side? Yeah.
No, I think
you
that
said Ukraine.
No, I think the question is about and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood Mark to be asking about the activity that Maria just mentioned, whether unarmed or armed resistance. So, for example, at the beginning of the war, we saw these very large demonstrations in those areas.
Yeah, that's right.
And very soon after that, there was a clampdown in those areas, which made that sort of protest impossible. But I think Maria's point, and it's what I understand from observing from the outside, is that that doesn't mean there's no resistance whatever in those areas. And I think Mark's question was, what forms is that resistance taking?
Well, I presume it takes the forms of creating an improvised explosive device, which is not that sophisticated a technique that even the surgeons in other places have learned quite quickly, and trying to put that improvised explosive device under the car or near the entrance of the collaborants, occupation administration people, which has been happening quite successfully. But you can see from the success rate, let's put it bluntly, that it is action is not of a special force operative, given that it is really an improvised explosive devices that they are using. So I presume it's the people who've been protesting for the first months until in Kherson and Melitopol and Berdyansk, who are now taking arms, whatever arms that they can hold of, and trying to use them to scare or to intimidate the Russian occupation forces, but also the collaborants. So I think you can never, obviously, well, we don't, this is a secret operation. We don't know whether the special forces are involved or not. There are various rumors, but you could presume by the nature of the action, it is a vigilante action by the local Ukrainian activists. I would guess. Just returning to the question of the car ownership, what I meant is that the streets are full of cars and now driven all by women, whereas in a normal city, the car driving technique is, the ownership of cars and driving is kind of mixed gender. So not only women are working, women also driving all the cars and also getting to the shops and bringing all the food and cooking it and cleaning it, whereas the husbands are hiding in cellars and going out for a smoke at night. And this is the true stories that I have. So that's the current. And so far those people have been quite successful in avoiding forced conscription. So I presume a lot of people doing that.
Okay, thank you very much. Dennis, do you want to add anything on this, or?
I don't think I can be too precise because this is not our field of research here. Okay. But I think minding the level of suspiciousness of Russians on the occupied areas, all these checkpoints, all this searching, they are pretty scared about some protest movements and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we go back to Yulia's question on the post-war development or reconstruction, does anybody want to come back to Aurora's point about civil society? To what extent can we say that organizations like yours represent civil society, and what shape does civil society have in these occupied areas? Anyone? Oleksandr, please.
In my view, Ukrainian civil society is an important, critical part of this discussion in Ukraine. For instance, in previous stage of Russian aggression, Ukrainian NGOs were maybe initiators of legislative changes and main initiators. And now the state is forming new strategy for temporary occupied territories and for IDPs. And in my view, now Ukrainian NGOs are closely involved in this discussion with the government. Sometimes Ukrainians NGOs are more active and more creative for resolution of real problem of people. And we have a lot of examples, for instance, related to rights of ADPs and citizens of temporary occupied territories for education on government controlled territories, related to electoral rights of IDPs. In my view, we have unique situation when NGOs are good and reliable partner of the government, and maybe sometimes they are more passionate and more active in this field. And also I want to add to discussion about resistance temporary occupied territories. I think the main type of resistance is that people refuse to collaborate with so-called civic military administration established by Russians. And we can understand our situation because Ukrainian government is providing assistance for legal local authorities in temporary occupied territories. For instance, in Kherson regions, some part of local authorities is continued to provide assistance for people, despite the fact that Russians are presented on the ground. And it's a tough decision for all actors, because sometimes media or politician blame these local authorities for collaboration, but Ukrainian government has priority to support our people, and local authorities still have money and have resources for assistance on the ground, and representatives of these local entities refused to collaborate with so-called new administration. And for instance, so-called civic military administration issued decree, and they trying to force representatives of local bodies to collaborate before new educational year, in the sphere of utilities, and now it's question how Russians will proceed with this so-called decree, and how brutal they will be in this sphere. And I can repeat that in my view, resistance of people to collaborate is the most important example of resistance in temporary occupied territories, because it's very tough decision to people to refuse collaborate with Russia's military forces, because for many of them this is impossible to move to non-occupied territories, because Russians openly banned movement people from some part, for instance, Kharkiv region, which is under occupation, to non-occupation territories. And we have example when citizens who live in a village in temporary occupied territories only near non-occupied territories, but they should go to Russia, and they return to Kharkiv region through third countries. And it's a very important point that Russians banned movement between occupied and non-occupied territories. And in comparison, in previous stage of aggression, it's brutal practice, because before Russians and so-called republics body provided some possibilities to move between different parts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and people had opportunity to be connected with relatives, with families. Now, for many of people, there is no options, and it's a clear and open strategy of Russia to damage any connection between Ukrainian citizens. And maybe we know answer why they do this, because they are preparing to keep control of these territories, and we should think about how we can prevent this. And I want to say about what we can do. And obvious question and simple answer to these questions is we should advocate new sanctions on Russia, because, for instance, we have a lot of Russian politicians who now are leaders of occupational strategy on the ground. And there are a lot of public officials from different Russian regions who work now on the ground, and they are not under sanctions. And during our broadcasting, and when we prepare article about trends in temporary occupied territory, we always pay attention to this fact that leaders of this occupational strategy aren't under sanction, and we should continue to pressure for this. Also, brutal violation in temporary occupied territories provide us with understanding that we should oppose any attempts to demand territorial concession from Ukraine, because you know some discussion about how we can deal with Russia among international experts in newspaper, in media, but through example of brutal violation, through example of unprecedented filtration system, we can show that it's impossible to push Ukraine for some concession, because it's not only question about international law and territorial integrity of Ukraine, it's also concrete question about how people in this territory will live, and we see that Russian provides a brutal example how they deal with Ukrainians. And in my view, we should discuss our support for initiatives to exclude Russia from international organization in which it has not right to be. I'm not going to discuss now in detail this, but it's important to keep this point. And obvious recommendation for all of us, we should support initiatives for war crime investigation and violation of rights of Ukrainian citizens. And for instance, I provided you with information how we are trying not only deal with this in Ukraine, but also we want to include refugees in this activity, and we want to preserve evidence, and we want to communicate with people and support with different types of
Oleksandr, thank you very much. Now I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to ask Maria and Dennis to comment, but if you please be brief, because we want to keep moving. I'm then going to ask Vlad again briefly to answer Yulia's question, which deserves actually a whole separate Zoom call, and I'm sure that at some stage we'll have one. I'm then going to ask Mariana, who's been waiting very patiently to ask her question, and then if there's anybody else, and then we're gonna wind up. So Maria, and then Dennis.
Yes, I also would like to echo my colleague Oleksandr on the necessity for the whole international community to understand that now Ukraine stands not only for our territorial integrity, we stand for every person, every citizen and not citizen who are there. I mean, human beings now for Ukraine are more important than anything, and these people are enduring hardship. Regarding the advocacy, I also support that any possible human rights organizations, NGOs in Europe, worldwide, can support and can demand their governments to apply more sanctions, especially sanctions regarding those actors who violate human rights in these territories, who are committing alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we know that also media workers who've been spreading and raising hate speech and spreading fake news and propaganda were actually contributing a lot in the occupied Crimea and in the occupied territories of Luhansk and Donetsk region and in Russia to raise this level of hatred towards Ukrainians, regular people, civilians, not only military, and towards Crimean Tatars as well. So they also have to be sanctioned for their raise of hatred. Regarding the civil society, I should state that currently Ukrainian civil society are as strong as possible ever. We are very united. Everyone found its superpower where they have their expertise to contribute to Ukraine's victory, to contribute to Ukraine's success. I know a lot of local initiatives, for example, media from Luhansk, Donetsk region who've been supporting, like local little settlements who had paper newspapers. They supported them to become web media, and this is like 50 different media. So now when they relocated sometimes from the city or little settlement, only the name of this local web media is now not occupied. So a lot of media workers are under attack, but those who managed to relocate, they continue to spread the information for local communities and occupied communities to convey the truth. Regarding humanitarian support, at the beginning, when a lot of human rights international organizations and monitoring organizations who had actual mandate to evacuate, to monitor, to support local communities were evacuating themselves. So Ukrainian regular people, civil society, or just regular people who have never been activists, organized, self-organized. Our colleague Lyudmila Yankina, who 15 years ago was a nurse at extensive care, stayed in Kiev during all this hostile military actions. She has never evacuated. She's been providing help to the elderly, to people with very serious diseases, with medicine, with food, with medical assistance on her own. She fundraised together with just regular Ukrainians 1 million hryvnias for that, and was first woman volunteer who came to help in liberated villages and cities and settlements in Kiev region when it was liberated, Bucha, Irpin regions. So Ukrainian society is as strong now as you can ever witness. Regarding the plan of so-called Marshall Plan, we actually advocate now to start to support communities now, because what Russia is doing now is making Ukraine unlivable place. A lot of civilian infrastructure was targeted, a lot of critical infrastructure was targeted. We are facing autumn and winter are cold in Ukraine. So we urge all international society to start to help now. This should be crisis response, because a lot of Ukrainians, like half, you know that 1/4 of population is displaced, and a lot of, like, majority of Ukrainians are ready to go back. They want to go back to Ukraine, but the infrastructure must be rebuilt now, renovated now. So we ask for this support as well. And also I'm thankful for everyone. We've been advocating a lot to suspend Russia from Human Rights Council, and it was success. I'm in Geneva now. I came for Human Rights Council, and the review of Russia under the UPR report, Universal Periodic Report, because we submitted our input regarding violations of in the occupied territories, and Russian government never show up. They postponed twice already their participation. So I agree with Oleksandr that we need to advocate to postpone, at least postpone or expel their participation, because they do not contribute to any dialogue. They violate human rights, and they now don't hide even. So this is my comment.
Okay.
Thanks, Maria, and Dennis, and then back to Vlad. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I can tell about our work, what we do in Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group. We provide these people who have managed to leave occupied areas with direct financial help. Like, our possibilities are very limited, but we crowdfunded some amount of money, and I think almost 200 of people received like the money. I think it is almost gone, and we do not sometimes have money for our own salaries, but it's nice to know that some people that survived this hell on earth received some support. And also we have connections with Russian colleagues, with Russian human rights activists, former dissidents, and like if we see the problem, not that the problem is not only the occupied areas, but Ukrainians that were forcibly moved to Russia, or they do not have documents sometimes, and Russian activists sometimes are paying for tickets for these people and are trying to help them to get the way out to Ukraine or to the EU countries. And of course, our possibilities are very limited on these gray zones. We are trying to find missing peoples, or to help free people, civilian people in Russian captivities, these filtration camps, and if there's someone we can do, I'm sure that the victory of Ukraine is the best way to stop human rights violations and to stop all this hell. So of course we need guns.
Okay, thank you. Vlad and then Mariana.
Yes, very briefly, your last question about reconstruction and the future economic development model for Ukraine. It's a big question. On the positive side, we need to take into account, if you look at the sectoral composition, agriculture has been very strong even before the war. Just to remind everyone, the Soviet Union under Brezhnev used to import about 40 million tons of wheat, of grain from US and Canada because they couldn't feed themselves. Before the war, Ukraine exported 40 million tons of wheat and grain. And Ukraine effectively feeds 400 million people overall, globally. With Russia, Ukraine and Russia, similar shares. It's about 1/4, 15% of all global export of grain. So it is a powerhouse in terms of agriculture. Services have been developing pretty well, even over the last 10, 15 years. It is, of course, the biggest problem that we have is industrial base and manufacturing. And I think that's the question Julius refers to, the development, especially in the old industrial regions of the eastern Ukraine. That is a big question mark. What is going to happen and what's going to be built or rebuilt, or nothing will happen there because it's too rusty and too old. On the other positive development, of course, we can learn from the EU accession of Eastern European states into the EU. The structural development, the European Regional Development Fund, the structural fund, instance, that was given to member candidate states in the accession accession period has been immense in developing those countries in terms of infrastructure, roads, bridges, the whole upgrade of modernization of social, from housing to schools, to kindergartens, to everything. And that's the blueprint has been already developed. It worked quite well in Poland, Romania, elsewhere, and I don't see this not working well for Ukraine, given that the reconstruction Ukraine will be effectively taken over by the EU in terms of the accession process. The question, of course, relies on whether the $750 billion euros will be spent, how they will be spent, how they will be controlled, how much local involvement, which of course we must insist on, will be, at the same time, how much is control over the enormous amount of money that is needed, an enormous amount of money that will be going to Ukraine. There are obvious concerns of the quality of government generally in Ukraine, and that concern is not going away because of the war. So that is a big and massive question. I suppose the European Commission has learned, working with countries like Hungary, how things can be how things can go wrong if a particular political clique take over and controls all the funds. So I suppose there are some lessons learned from that. So I'm fairly optimistic in terms of the blueprint and the structures. I'm not as optimistic about the spatial composition of the construction of Mariupol, after liberation, construction of Mariupol, Donetsk, and other cities in eastern Ukraine. What is the purpose of those? Why those cities need to exist, and how they would exist, and what would be the purpose of them being a faraway corner of Ukraine and then a faraway borderlands of Europe? I mean, that is a massive question that we need to discuss we need more time than that.
Okay, thank you, Vlad. Now, Mariana, you've been waiting patiently. Please ask your question.
Merci. Denis a en partie répondu à une partie de ma question, c'était par rapport aux déportations. Je voulais savoir si on a une évaluation du nombre de personnes que cela concerne. Je ne sais pas si Denis ou Maria peuvent me répondre. Est-ce que ces gens-là ont le statut de prisonniers de guerre ou pas? Et vous nous dites on leur enlève les papiers, évidemment, quand ils partent, on leur enlève l'argent, les portables, etc. Combien de temps restent-ils là-bas? À quel moment ils partent? Voilà, c'est pas très, très clair pour moi. Est-ce qu'il y a des réactions internationales par rapport à ça? Et juste une réflexion par rapport à ce que disait Vlad là, sur l'Union européenne et la reconstruction. Effectivement, il y a des fonds pour les nouveaux membres, mais il y a des fonds avec des conditions draconiennes en général.
Okay, thank you. I think that not only I was probably too slow to find the translation channel, maybe others also were too slow. Maybe our speakers were too slow. If you can forgive me for saying so. Can somebody repeat the question in English, please? Anybody?
I think I switched to fast and to the
well
translation,
done.
and yeah, the question was about to me about Ukrainians in Russia that were deported,
Okay.
And the problem that they are without any documents, and about number of people of Ukrainians in Russia. Like Ukrainian ombudsman tells that it's more than 2 million of people. She says it's according to Russian internal sources that she has access to. The numbers of the United Nations are smaller, I think, but it's more than 1 million. And of course, some of Ukrainians have already left Russia to other countries. And I think Ukrainian government should establish some procedure for these people to get their documents, to get the possibility to live. And it's like in the case of Georgia, when Russia invaded Georgia, there was the consulate of Switzerland, which was providing with the consulate services for these people under Russian occupation. But in case of Ukraine, there's no certainty about this, and I think there are some other questions, but I haven't heard them in English.
I think people have been able to cross the Russian, Latvian, Russian, Estonian, Russian, Finnish border without Ukrainian passports, and we're giving welcome. So,
s'ils avaient un statut ou pas? Est-ce qu'ils ont un statut de prisonnier de guerre ou pas?
Well, I understand that the prisoners of war are a sensitive situation in which the Red Cross is involved, and we are told that the Red Cross is negotiating or controlling, kind of mediating between the Russian and Ukrainian army for the prisoners of war. But of course, a lot of them are on the occupied territories in the Donbass, which Russia recognizes as a separate entity with their own and other illegal structures. So of course, that is a question that we'll worry about, Mariana.
Okay. I think that we're going to end it here, and I feel that I'm going to end it by, first of all, thanking all our speakers. And I just want to draw attention, in case anybody didn't see, please look in the chat. Maria has mentioned that she forgot to say during her speech that she herself is from Lugansk and has been an internally displaced person for 8 years. Her family is from a background in political activism, so her parents are also not able to return to Lugansk. And so, right here with us, it's another example of the personal tragedy, which has been multiplied, as somebody said earlier, thousands and thousands of times. So I think it would be really stupid for me to try to pretend that we know answers to a lot of the questions. This has, to my mind, opened up a lot of issues that I've been trying to follow what's going on in these occupied territories, but I have a lot more questions now than I did a couple of hours ago. But that's fine. That's what we're trying to do here. So. Just to mention to you, I think everybody knows, we've got a second call where we're going to look in more detail about the situation with the labor movement in the occupied territories. Please join us for that on Thursday, the 14th of July. And then on the 17th, on the Sunday, we're going to gather in a more practical mode, and that meeting will take place also on Zoom. And you can email the European network if you're not already in touch with them. I'll put that email in the chat again now. If you want to attend that gathering on the 17th, the one on the 14th is completely open. You can sign up on Zoom. The address is all over social media and on the European Solidarity website. So thank you very much to our speakers. I'll tell you all now that I'm going to get back in touch with you as we work out things that we think we can do and ways that we can develop this campaign. So look out for my emails and communications to you. But thanks very much for joining us, and thanks everybody else for a very good meeting. And we'll leave it there.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
everyone. All the best.
Okay. Everybody's gone home. Anything to say now, Adam or Stephanie, or we'll just speak on email? You're muted. Stephanie, you're muted. No, can't hear you. Okay, never mind. We'll continue on email. Okay, thanks everybody, and I'm leaving as well. Okay.